Hello, science enthusiasts. Welcome to SciChat. Every week on Twitter, we bring you experts to enthrall you with their area of knowledge. This week, we have Anthrozoologist Maythe, who's going to talk to us about the relationship between humans and dogs, many of the good things, and some of the maybe not so good things. How are you doing today, Maythe?
I'm okay. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. Now, just for, we were chatting about time zones. You are, it's 2:00 in the morning for you right now, you said.
It is. I live in Scotland.
You live in Scotland. Now, are you there for work, school? Have you lived there for a while?
I moved here in 2018 to start my PhD, and I'm almost at the end of it. Yeah.
Okay. Where are you from originally, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm from Canada. I'm from Toronto.
You're from Toronto. Okay, very cool. All right. So you got the drizzle of Scotland and maybe a little less snow. I don't know.
Oh yeah, thank God. I am not a fan of snow.
You're not a fan of snow?
I will never go back to Toronto.
Oh, but Toronto has well, I was going to say the Maple Leafs, but they just got kicked out of the playoffs, so everybody's very sad over there, so
They have Yonge Street.
okay.
There's nothing in Toronto. There's nothing there.
We've talked to many scientists from Scotland, and it's slowly building the bug to go visit that place. It just sounds very magical and nice.
It's really wonderful. I quite like living here. And it's like, I live in Edinburgh, and it's such a dog-friendly city. It's nuts. You can take your dog pretty much anywhere.
Oh, that's wonderful. So we have some people saying they can't hear anything.
Oh, no.
So I can hear you. You can hear me. Mm-hmm. Folks in the audience, can you give me a heart if you can hear us? We just got to wait. There's a bit of delay from speaker to audience. Okay, so we've got, please give me a heart emoji if you can hear. Okay. So that's the majority of people. So I think it's localized to a few people. So again, sometimes it's glitchy with spaces. If you can't hear anything, what you can do is close the space and then come back in. That's happened to me before as a listener. And sometimes it's because I am doing a bunch of things at once on my phone. I'm trying to multitask. Okay, so we've got that solved. Maythe, I got a couple standard questions just at the start. I introduced you as a anthrozoologist. Am I saying that right? Anthrozoologist?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Now, what does that entail? What do you have to do to be an anthrozoologist? What's your education?
So my academic training is actually in cultural anthropology and material culture studies.
Okay.
But anthrozoologist is kind of like a combination of anthropology, which is very broadly speaking study of human stuff, and zoology, which is study of life. So but oftentimes zoologists tend to focus on non-human animals, as if humans are not animals. So I think it's a bit silly. So you just kind of smash them together and you get anthrozoologist. And usually anthrozoologists study human and non-human animal relationships, which is exactly what I do.
I was going to say that, and I Googled that, but sometimes when you Google things, it's not 100% accurate.
Yeah, you never know with these things.
What got you into that area of research, that area of that area of wanting to study that? Like, when you were young, was that something you were curious about?
No, when I was young, I had no idea what anthropology was, what zoology was. And both my parents are physicians, so they were very much like, well, maybe you'll also go on to study something like biology. But no, I didn't. But I've always been a dog person, but it was really when I got Frank, my first dog of my own that wasn't a family dog, that I started thinking more about what it meant to be a dog person. And I guess my academic training in cultural anthropology and material culture studies kind of led my PhD to be about this like broad themes surrounding dog culture. So, for example, I look at dog stuff like dog food and toys and treats to make connections between dogs and capitalism.
Mm.
I also try to understand knowledge production around dogs, like how do people use quite creatively like these existing categories like breeds, species, and rescues to make sense of their dogs as well as dogs in general. Yeah.
Hmm. So the study of ancient cultures, when you're young, that's not something you were like, I'm going to get myself a whip and a nice hat and go study some ancient ruins kind of thing.
No, I mean, I was obsessed with Indiana Jones for a
Oh,
little
okay. A
while.
little while. All
Yeah.
right.
But it quickly turned out to be like, oh no, these things maybe do not belong in a museum and they should remain with indigenous people.
Oh, this is true. Yeah, there's a little problematic. It's a little problematic some areas to say that, I think.
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's good society is changing to recognize that, that was good for the movies, but we were forgetting an entire perspective by hauling stuff out of the jungle where maybe it should have stayed in the movie at least. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. I do like his hat though. I don't know if I can pull off that hat. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think you can pull off anything.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Well, that's my wife, so I guess maybe I can get the Indiana Jones hat. So just a couple questions. If you are tuning in to Science Chat for the first time, we do a little interview where you get to know our guest a little bit better. And then we open up the floor to questions after the interview section. So, be thinking about good questions to ask. We are simulcasting right now also to Clubhouse, and some folks on there are popping in and out. So if you're on Clubhouse and you don't know what's going on, because we've just started simulcasting there, that's the story. So my first question for you, specific to what you're doing now, is you did some research into dog-human kinship and dog parents. And I read your whole, or it was actually a lecture, right? It was a lecture that you sent me.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was really interesting. Could you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So like dog parents and dog children became a topic of interest for me when I started realizing just how many people refer to their dogs as their children, like their kids, their daughters, their boys. And I never wanted human kids myself, and Frank is definitely my child. But that's not to say that I treat him exactly like a human child, because he's not. And as Donna Haraway reminded us, equality can actually be a deadly thing in multi species kinship because we are not equal. So I started looking at the similarities and differences that might exist between dog children and human children, and they are similar in so many ways. So people call dogs their children, and they wouldn't even say that their dogs are like their children. They would straight up call them, "Yes, this is my child," and they would spend money on them like they're their children. I certainly do. Most of my income goes to Frank, I'm sure.
Oh,
And
I don't even want
they
to talk about the income that goes to Bunsen and Beaker.
yeah, we don't think about it. It's better that way. And we also share this like affective connections in similar ways as well, right? So we like to cuddle them, we like to talk to them like, baby talk.
Hmm.
Um but I think the crucial difference between human children and dog children that was highlighted during my fieldwork was that dog children, and this is really kind of sad, but they almost always die before we do. And we
Mm.
know that when we get dogs. And this is something that does really interesting things to this figure of the child that we normally associate it with the future. And they are expected to kind of carry on some sort of legacy for their human parents. But with dog children, that just doesn't happen. And in fact, I've had multiple research participants tell me that they spoil their dogs because they don't live long enough. So,
Mm.
in that way, dog children really kind of shift the temporality of childhood from the future to the present. And as a highly anxious person whose brain is almost always preoccupied with the future, this is something that was a bit of a groundbreaking thing. So Frank really grounds me in the present because I know that he's not always going to be around. And so that means I have to spend time with him now. I have to love him now. I
Mhm.
have to spoil him now. And as sad as it is, I think there's a lesson to be learned here about what it means to make kin and what it means to have a child and also what it means to be a parent.
Yeah, so that's what I found really interesting was you were talking about your own life, but also you had like participants who were very candid with you about their answers.
Yeah.
Was any of that were any of their participants that had, new babies, like human babies? Did any of their answers jump out at you or surprise you about the differences?
Yeah, so I had one participant who had a 3 or 4 year old daughter, and her dog was maybe like 10, 11, like quite a senior boy.
Mhm.
But she was cradling the dog like an actual human baby and called him her firstborn.
Oh,
Yeah, and that just kind of got me thinking about, oh, maybe it's not actually that big of a or that like separate of a distinction that people would draw like once I have a human child the dog kind of ceases to be a child, but actually there's some kind of weird affective logic going on here that kind of makes dogs always be a child. And it's I don't really know what it is. I don't really know how it works. Even with my own life, I don't know why Frank is my child, but he just is. And it's such a common occurrence that, like you can get a t-shirt on like Etsy or Amazon that says like dog mom. Um,
we
or
sell those
dog
on
dad.
our merch shop
Oh,
actually.
yes.
Yeah. I think
Yeah, it's
Chris,
just
do you have a dog mom t-shirt from our store?
Not only do I have a dog mom T-shirt, I have a dog mom coffee mug
Oh my
that
goodness.
I parade around with. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I sometimes drink coffee out of it and you're like, that's not for you. So that's a whole thing.
I have never said that. That is not anything that I have ever said.
Oh,
I would
yes.
give you like the stink eye if you were using it, but I wouldn't say anything.
Oh, I remember that differently. But but anyways, Maythe, do you think this is new? Like since like anthropology, the study of ancient cultures, did ancient older cultures or even like a couple hundred years ago, did people see dogs the way that maybe the average person sees their dog today?
I don't think so. Especially because I mean, even if you look at this concept of dog breeds, like pedigree dog breeds,
Mm.
that's actually quite relatively recent in like historical times. So these like this idea of pedigree dog breeds and the I guess advent or invention of dog breeds, it was only really back to like the Victorian era that it became a thing, like an established idea. And it came from livestock breeding practices in the UK, which obviously is very expensive to like buy a horse.
Yeah.
So yeah, so most middle and working class people couldn't participate in that, but they could with dogs because they're cheaper, they're smaller. So they kind of really adapted horse breeding practices and used it on dogs
Oh my
to
goodness, that's
form
fascinating.
yeah, to form them into these distinct breeds that didn't really exist before. So dogs, especially in the UK, were basically bred mostly for function before the Victorian era. So sheepdogs would be bred to herd sheep. Cow herding dogs like corgis, they were bred to be kind of lower to the ground so that they can nip at the ankles and not trip them over. So they were very, very closely related to function rather than form. But as like middle classness became an emerging thing, dogs like pets became a thing, right?
Hmm.
So dogs that were kind of being bred for companionship rather than function, well, why not play with form?
Mhm.
So that's how dogs like pugs especially kind of came about. like what function could they possibly serve
I'm
as,
not sure. They
this
kind of have trouble
wrinkly.
breathing just moving around.
Exactly. And it's cruel in many ways, but that's the trouble of our multi-species kinship, one of many, I would say.
Mm.
Yeah, it's but yeah, to answer your question more directly, no, it has not always been this way. And I think I've spoken to like business owners who run like pet boutiques and stuff, and some of them have told me that they think it has this phenomenon of dog parents and dog children. It can be maybe attributed to fewer and fewer people, especially younger people, having kids.
Hmm.
So one of the boutique owners told me, "Oh, I think it's because of DINKs, which stands for
Double income, no kids."
Yeah. So instead of having human children, they would pour all of this love and money into dog children.
Hmm. Well, we have children, and we have dog children. So I don't know. It's funny you bring up the word dink. That's what is that what Duncan called my brother and his wife until they had kids, Chris?
Yep.
Yeah.
Double income, no kids.
Yeah, so I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought he was just disparaging my brother and his wife because they were I was like, don't call them that. And he's like, no, it means they're double income, no kids. I'm like, oh, okay. Good job, Duncan. Duncan is our older son. So, but I have another question. Like, I'm just fascinated by this, that to play with the posh people, dog breeding became a pastime of people that could maybe afford the middle ground. People back in the day, like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they had to love their dogs, though, just maybe not in the same way. Is that true, or is there evidence to that?
I mean, maybe that's not really an area of my expertise.
Okay.
But, like if you look at, so I did a minor in classics in undergrad, and in the Odyssey, which is in ancient Greek, there is a little passage about Odysseus's dog who has waited and waited and waited for Odysseus to come back from the Trojan War. And he dies of happiness and relief upon seeing Odysseus come back. And that's like the end of it. And it's just like, oh my goodness. Like even the ancient Greeks kind of acknowledged this love and trust and connection between dog and their owner or master, or dare I say parent.
Does that make, like, when you learn these little nuggets through studies of the past with the kinship between humans and dogs, and does that make you feel fuzzy? Like, is that rewarding when you learn these new things? I'd imagine it kind of gives you a little boost when these nuggets come about.
Yeah, it's just, there's always things that make you go like, oh, and I don't know. There's obviously something to be said about things like attachment theory, which shows us that like there is value in something that is like physically warm and soft and near you. And there's also something to be said about, just puppies looking at you, looking to you for love and support and trust. And yeah, it is a good feeling to kind of see through historical times that our connection goes a very, very long way.
On my podcast, I look into the science of our relationship with animals quite often, but the sociology aspect of it, the relationship part, that's not something that I know anything about. So I'm just it's very interesting what you're talking about. I find it so fascinating. Now, from the fuzzy to maybe the not so fuzzy, you also have done research into, I guess some of the ugly underbelly of dog love and really, really loving your animal. And I don't want to muddle what my question is, but I wonder if you could talk about that area of your research.
Yeah, of course. So like as with intra-species kinship among humans, like I'm sure everybody has a tumultuous family story, or at least like an argument with their family members, like kinship isn't always warm and fuzzy and happy and agreeable. So I saw in my digital ethnographic research, particularly, that love of dogs was often instrumentalized to further white supremacist views under the guise of animal welfare specifically. So back in May, June 2020, when Black Lives Matter protests started kicking off across the US as well as the UK, there was an incident in London during one of these protests during which a police horse got injured. And this
I
kind
remember
of,
this actually.
yeah, and this like stirred a really kind of horrific conversation in some of the digital spaces that I was a part of, including this meme that had a caption that literally read, "Canine lives matter." And I saw that while police animals were being humanized through discourses of rights and protections, racialized people were being dehumanized through discourses of animalization. So, racialized people who were involved in Black Lives Matter protests were being called wild animals who lacked humanity because they were standing in opposition to these beloved police animals that were deemed innocent and, as some people have commented, just doing their jobs. So, animalization of racialized people has long been a tactic of white supremacists and the far right. So I'm not claiming to have found like a revolutionary and new phenomenon. And questions of animality and questions of humanity have always been closely connected because racialized people were seen as closer to animals than white people. And certain animals, especially dogs, were used against racialized people to intimidate and to exercise violence toward. And it's a really complex and convoluted history, but I think it ultimately comes down to what a lot of scholars call intersubjectivity. So non-human animals have not only lived alongside humans, but also been a proxy in human thought. So they're really easy to kind of project thoughts and ideas and even status onto. So, for example, in the Victorian era, the common thought was that rich people and their dogs weren't as prone to contracting rabies as poor people and their dogs. And we see similar intersubjective links between dogs and their humans today as well, often using, the well-known categories of breed and race and class, like the memes that we see online. And there's this t-shirt that I saw online just earlier today while I was browsing, and it said "Black dogs matter." And
Hmm.
like these things just kind of leave me speechless. And I'm actually working on a chapter on this topic now. And I'm just like sitting there being like, oh my God, how do I even begin to talk about this? Where do I go?
Yeah, it's a tough area. I can't speak to any of it because it's not something I have expertise in, but I'm glad that you've kind of broke that down for us. Yeah, that you can easily put your ideals of a dog on people too. Just even a breed of dog like the golden retriever, right? Like Beaker is a golden retriever. She's silly and she's friendly, so you can personify that within people. Like that person is a golden retriever.
Yeah.
And is that kind of what you're getting at too, with maybe the idea of moving your ideals onto animals that live close to humans?
Yeah. So, golden retrievers are a really great example because people quite readily associate them with, they're good family dogs. They're silly, they're goofy, they're good with kids. They kind of represent this like nuclear
The nuclear
family.
family. That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. Okay, gotcha.
White
Yeah.
picket fence house,
Yeah.
like all of that.
Yeah.
And then, on the, I guess, flip side, there are like pit bulls, right?
Mhm.
That are, I think, slowly kind of becoming more associated with middle classness through a lot of like rescues and saviorist discourses, but they're also still quite, associated with dog fighting
Mm.
and poorer neighborhoods, racialized neighborhoods, especially racialized men. So, yeah, dogs and humans' status and identities are often very closely connected and in this like a weirdly mappable ways. And it kind of perpetuates it makes these stereotypical ideas easier to perpetuate because, like I said, dogs are quite easy to project onto.
Mm-hmm. And you have the people have such a bond with them, they don't necessarily see what the language they're using is a stereotype. I guess what I'm saying is this.
Yeah,
They're blinded
exactly.
by their love for their pet.
Yeah.
Interesting. Is there a call to action for any of this? Like, is this just knowledge we should know? Is there anything that we can do to, change this negativity?
So something that I think a lot about is maybe there should be a shift from this intersubjective linking between dogs and humans, and more toward what a scholar named Harlan Weaver called sensibility. And that refers to this way of producing knowledge about dogs that foregrounds bodily interactions with dogs themselves. So rather than thinking about these like quite prescriptive ideas of species or breed or rescues or what have you, maybe what we can do is focus on interacting with a dog with our very fleshly bodies and understanding what it is that we experience and what it is that the dog experiences. And we can kind of start to form a kinship that's not really based on these categories that always kind of inevitably leave gaps. Because, like if you look at golden retrievers, not all of them will be perfectly friendly. Not all of them will be good family dogs.
Mm-hmm.
There will be golden retrievers that, are anxious, that, have aggression issues, like there is in any breed. So maybe it would be better for us as well as for the dogs that we focus on our bodily interactions, our grounded engagements with one another, rather than thinking about, well, this dog is supposed to be this way because they are this breed or because they're a rescue.
You take them where they're at rather than what you think they are.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, what's really interesting, Maythe, is we are in the end of June, we have Kathleen Morrill, who's also working on her PhD. She was the author of this massive study on breeds and traits. And the long and short of it is that 11% of traits match breeds, and the rest of it is random. So
is that the paper that was published in Nature recently?
Yeah, the Nature paper. Yeah,
yes.
Isn't that fascinating? So that's exactly what you're talking about. Is that generally, if you look at all dogs, all dog breeds, mixed breeds, they're the same. They have all of the ups and downs equal across all of the different breeds of dogs, with the exception of about 11% of traits.
Yeah,
that's really cool, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's like, if you really just kind of like sit down and think about it, it makes perfect sense. Like we are not our parents. We are not our, ancestors. And why should dogs be? Like they experience the world with their bodies just as we do.
Mm-hmm.
And they will process information as they come, just as we do. I mean, not in the same ways, obviously, because we are different species and we're built differently. But I think it's a bit of anthropocentric arrogance to think that maybe dogs are more genetically determined than humans are.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of like weird Polish genes I have that make me do Polish stuff. Like, I don't know. I'm not predisposed to liking pierogies and borscht and stuff like that. So I don't know. I hate borscht. It's gross. Sorry for any Ukrainian and Polish people out there. I didn't mean to, but I get what you're saying. So, though I am susceptible to the sun, that's a thing. That is a Polish thing. The further away you are from the equator, that you're more susceptible you are to star damage. Your ancestors, at least. Let's move to the next question, Maythe. This was all very interesting. A question that we have time for, sometimes we run out, but we got time to talk about it, is a pet story from your life. Usually the folks that listen in love to hear our guests talk about their pets. Could you do that with us?
Of course I can, and I'm delighted to because I love
Yay.
talking about my baby. Um, so Frank is a rescue from Russia. Um, and I got him in 2017. And that's when I had finished my master's and I was like, okay, I have a job now. I want to get a dog. And I was in Toronto at the time and I was looking at these local shelters and none of them would give me a dog because
Oh.
I was renting.
Oh.
And all of these people who were looking to also get a dog were, owners of these massive houses with, 8-foot fences. And I was living in a dog friendly but apartment building.
Right.
And I almost gave up on trying to get a dog because
Oh.
it was just like impossible and the standards were impossible. They were like, you have to have a yard, you have to have this. And they insisted on like really detailed interviews about not just what would make me like a good dog parent, but also like really just kind of invasive questions like, oh, like what is the combined income of your household? And I'm like, well, that's kind of none of your business, but okay. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like
So
after
I
a certain
ended
point,
up
it doesn't really matter. Can you afford to feed your dog, basically, and take
exactly.
it to
And
the
like
vet? Yeah.
I wouldn't be looking to adopt a dog if I couldn't afford to take care of the dog. So I was really just, I almost gave up. But then one of my friends who I went to university with, and she is Russian American, and she told me, oh, my mom actually volunteers for this place. It's called Sochi Dogs, and they adopt dogs out of Sochi to different North American cities. Why don't you go give them a try? And I saw Frank's profile online and was just like, okay, cool, sounds good. Applied for the dog, got the dog, and they flew him out. I
Wow, flew him out.
Yeah, they flew him out from
Well, I guess you'd
Sochi
have to,
to
yeah, either that or a boat, probably a plane.
yeah. Yeah, they flew him out as cargo from Sochi to like Morristown, New Jersey, and he got picked up from there by a volunteer private pilot and got flown to Niagara, New York, where I picked him up
Oh my
by
goodness.
a rental car.
This is like a
And
Mission Impossible thing.
yeah, it was quite something. And yeah, and that was how I met Frank for the first time, which sounds nuts given that is definitely the mood. And we moved to Edinburgh together. It was very stressful because moving internationally with a dog is stressful.
Mm.
And expensive. But he's a different dog from when I first got him.
Oh.
He was quite nervous, quite in his shell. But I really kind of have to thank Edinburgh for being literally the most dog friendly city I've ever lived in. There I think there's about like 500,000 people in the city and over 400 self-described dog-friendly businesses across the city.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's not just like dog stores, like dog supply stores or anything. It's like hair salons, restaurants,
Hair salons.
hair salons. I kid you not. They're just like, yes, bring your dog. And there's quite a few like barber shops that I pass by on my way like into town, and they have their like resident dog.
Oh.
Like people here are obsessed with dogs. Like you will go outside every day and you will never not see a dog.
Oh, Frank is adorable. I'm just looking at pictures of him.
Oh, Frank heard you say his name and then he just shot up. He was
I
like,
threw
yes.
a post in the nest for people to take a look at Frank. I'm sorry, it's a photo of Frank. He's on a path with you and he's looking up and there's like blooms of some kind of like flowers. It's a gorgeous picture. He's wearing a little coat, a little red coat.
Yes.
Sorry, I derailed the conversation.
No. I mean, Frank is adorable. That is, facts are facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he has a really horrible motorcycle reactivity.
Mm.
And he will spin and bark and sound like a really scary dog. But something that I kind of started noticing when his reactivity started getting really kind of built up and hyped up was that even when I was out and about without Frank, if I heard a motorcycle from a distance, the hair on the back of my neck would stand up.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is multi-species sensibility.
Because
Like
you're
this
reacting because he reacts.
exactly. I'm
Hmm.
anticipating a dog barking, pulling, lunging, spinning, even when he's not there.
Hmm.
So he has literally changed my life, my body, how I interact with my environment. And I think that's amazing.
It's cool.
It's yeah.
Yeah, the dog. Because of my podcast, I don't have as much background as you, but like the science is pretty straightforward that there's no other animal that has lived as close with humans as dogs have. Like they are the animal that has for thousands and thousands of years lived like in our homes and close to our homes and been more of a companion than something for food, like
Yeah.
with livestock. So yeah.
Yeah, they are pets par excellence. Like I love dogs. My boyfriend makes fun of me for this all the time. I would just randomly sit down and say, "My gosh, I love dogs." At least once a day, just out of nowhere.
Now we have so many dog owners in the audience listening. An interesting thing we should try is throw an emoji up of a heart if you consider your dogs your children. So let's see what happens. So everybody in the audience, throw up a heart if you think of your dogs as your children. Okay, and we'll wait a sec because there's a bit of a delay. Do you see all the hearts, Maythe?
Yes.
Now that's not everybody's gonna think that. That's okay. So I don't want to. No peer pressure. So don't hit a heart if you don't really think so. It's okay. What do you think, Chris? Do you think of Bunsen and Beaker as our kids?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. You definitely. When she was talking about how you hold the animals like babies, you always do that. You do that with the cat. You do that with the dogs.
Well, I can't
just
do that
flip
with
them
Bunsen
over.
anymore. He's way too big.
Well, I think you would if you could just grab
When he was a
him
puppy,
and
I
then,
held him like that.
yeah. I don't know.
I do call. You know what's funny is I call Bunsen when I come home. I call Bunsen big guy. Hey, big guy. And then I call Beaker, hello, baby girl. That's what I call her.
Oh.
So I don't know. That's it's a little different there. I don't know.
And I say, hey, puppy 1, hey, puppy 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I call them puppy.
You call them puppy, yeah.
I don't say, hey, come over here, kids.
I do tell Bunsen to go to his mom when he's not listening to me. I said
that's true. And I'll say, hey, go to dad. Dad has food for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we do.
Yeah, we do use the parent language with them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're not on their case to get their driver's license like with Adam. So that's another story. Yeah.
Well,
I think that's
Bunsen
illegal.
was driving in the car today.
Who was? Oh yeah,
picture.
Yeah, that picture has like 7,000 likes, Chris, and over 1,000 comments. That was a good post by you, by the way. I think Uber commented on that picture.
Oh my God.
Okay, anyways, so sorry, Maythe. We're at the point of the show where we're going to open up the floor to our audience if they have questions about dogs and kinship and what you've studied. So if you have a question for our guest, go ahead and request the mic. I've got a couple more questions in my pocket in case some folks don't have questions for you. There's usually a few. And remember, if Chris and I don't recognize your account, we do double check to see what's going on with you. To make sure that you're not a troll, because this is a safe space and we control who gets to ask questions. So Chris is being the wonderful co-host that she is allowing people to speak. So who's up first for our speakers, Chris?
We have Liz, and then Donna, then Tracy, and then Danielle.
All right, so I think Liz is up. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you. So, hey, girl. how's the dissertation going? Did you get
Oh
it
my
all
God.
started?
How dare you ask such a dangerous question?
You don't have to answer that, but
It's fine. It's fine.
You're qual, right? Not quant?
Yes.
Okay. So when you were talking to the people about like considering their pets like their kids, did any of them express, okay, I'm with you, human kids are terrible. I'd rather have quadrupeds, but people with kids, and no offense if you get offended, that's up to you. People with human kids get really, really pissed off when you mention that your pets are your kids, and there's like a huge debate. So did anybody that you interviewed like express like that they didn't want to admit perhaps that they think that way, or did they kind of seem ashamed of it, or I don't know how you coded things, but
Yeah, so I remember this one woman who was quite older. I think she was in her early 60s, and she had adult human children who were all grown up and left home and are independently, living their lives and all that. And she had her dog who will never be an independent adult person who moves out of the home. And
we're still waiting for Bunsen and Beaker to make that leap, Maythe.
yeah, geez, like clock is ticking. Like, get out of here, kids. But she was so reluctant to admit that she felt motherly towards the dog. And then it turned out that she volunteered for a pet bereavement hotline, and she was like, I can't really stand to kind of go through the heartbreak of admitting that yes, my dog is my child, and then yes, my child will die before I do. So I think that's a big kind of mental hurdle for some. And I interviewed a dog trainer, and he was one of the few men that I got to interview. And he was like, yeah, I do feel paternal towards a dog, but it's more of a partnership. It's more of a friendship. We're more equal. And I don't really know why he felt that way. I really did try to like probe and prod, and he was like, I don't know. So I don't really have an answer other than, I guess, yeah, there were people who were reluctant and hesitant about it, but I guess they all have their different reasons. Sorry, it's not a very satisfying answer.
that's what you get with qualitative. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
It's true. It's true. It's all about the messiness and the stories.
But okay, yeah, I was just curious because I have no problem. Like, there's people have pictures of kids on their phones. Like, here's my cat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, dear.
I got a story for you, Liz. Chris will probably remember this. My cousin Mandy is similar age to me, and Chris and I had kids way before, like, human kids. We had human kids way before, like, anybody else in our family, like, way before. Like, how old is Duncan to the next one? James? Like 10, 12 years? Something like that. So we had kids way before the rest of my family. And my cousin Mandy was thinking about having kids, and she got a cat. And she's like, yeah, we're getting ready to have kids, so we got a cat because it's the same thing. And then Chris and I were like, I don't know about that. So I can see why human parents maybe get a little grouchy about that. But do you remember that, Chris?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. We were like, you are in for a surprise.
Yeah. But I don't begrudge anybody at all for thinking that their pet is their child. I'm not that way. It's just they're different. And cats go poop and pee in a litter box as opposed to a diaper. Big difference. So there's a story, Liz. Okay, who's our next? Who's got the next question?
So we have Donna, then Tracy, then Danielle.
Perfect.
Hi, Maythe. How are ya? Thanks for staying up through the middle of the night to give us a fascinating chat. So I'm sitting here listening intently, and I feel like, and I could be totally sexist in saying this, but I feel like men are like, oh, yeah, that's my child, because they literally can't have kids. So women tend to be like, yeah. But my question is during your interview process, did you touch on the subject that it seems nowadays that most people name their pets after humans? Like you have Frank, and instead of the traditional dog names like Spot, Rover, Buddy, that they tend to have a lot of human names.
Yeah, they really do. And I don't know why or when this became a trend, but like you would talk to people and you know, dog people just love to make conversation about their dogs. And they would be like, "Oh, like what's your dog's name?" And then I would be like, "Oh, his name is Frank." And then like unfailingly every time they would be like, "Oh my god, I love dogs with human names." Yeah, like every time. And I'm like, I mean, I guess me too, but I never really given it much thought. But then I think I realized I also really like animals with human names. I think it maybe makes them feel a bit closer to being like children or being children, or it actually somehow seems less infantilizing. Um like you call a dog Spot, but then there will probably never be a human child that would be named Spot or Fido or stereotypical dog names. So yeah, maybe that's another. Oh man, you're giving me new ideas to write about, and I'm just
Well,
like,
and a follow up to that is I blame Disney because Disney has made every character under the sun humanized. So I'm worried about a clownfish. Where is he? I'm, worried about the dog in Up who can talk through a collar because it's been humanized. So, I don't know if that's part of our ingrained behavior in calling our pets kids as we've gotten older in the years.
I think that's a really interesting and great point because I think it's both, I guess, simplistically speaking, good and bad because, well, we can only be anthropocentric because we are human. Like, human perspective is the only perspective that we can really experience ourselves. So I think maybe it is an attempt at understanding animals and, especially with Disney, given that it's geared towards children, it maybe teaches younger humans that hey, like non-human animals also have these like rich inner lives that can be kind of understood as very human adventures or very human emotions. But also, there's danger in anthropocentrism in that, like you said, it's kind of like what a clownfish that gets lost that the dad has to go like find them in a dentist aquarium. Like that's nonsense. Uh, and that's not necessarily quite accurate representation of what like animal behavior or animal sentiments or animal affects. So there's, that's kind of both sides of the debate, I guess. But I think I don't really know what I think. It's almost 3 a.m. It's yeah, I think animalization of humans, especially, in the white supremacy topic that I briefly touched on, um, kind of coupled with humanization of non-human animals can be a really kind of scary thing to look at because like like on the one hand there are all these non-human animals that are on in Disney films being all cutesy, very humanized, very lovable, very relatable, and then on the other hand there are actual human beings who are being slaughtered on the streets and being called wild animals. So where do we go from there? Yeah.
I do have to say though, Doug and Up. Have you seen Up, Maythe?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, when he's like, I was hiding under the stairs because I love you. That is such a dog thing. They really thought about that.
Yeah, and I mean, we see like who's that dog on TikTok? Bunny, who talks through buttons, right?
Yeah, yes.
And like it's clear that they have some idea, some semblance of idea of how human language works, and they can communicate in some coherent way
Mhm.
to tell humans, this is what I want, this is what I'm thinking.
Mhm. I think if we put one of those talkie collars on Bunsen, it would be a whole lot of asking for bacon and moose legs. So I don't know if I'm ready to deal with that. But text from Bunsen is literally what you were just talking about, Maythe. I write these things every week called Text from Bunsen, where Bunsen texts us. It's really popular. And it's like the adventures of Bunsen and Beaker if they were able to have human conversations. So,
yeah.
All right, who's our next?
I must say, your ones last week were on point and excellent. Some of your best ones.
All right.
They were great.
Who's our next question? Who has the next question, Chris?
We have Tracy, then Danielle.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Tracy.
Hi.
Hi.
One thing I just want to say, shout out to Morristown, New Jersey, since that's where I was born. So I'm like, yay, I got mentioned. But I want to know if you felt like, well, I have a cat, but I guess dogs like adopt behaviors similar to their owners.
Behaviors that are similar to owners. I mean, okay, so my boyfriend just glanced at me and smirked because one of his favorite phrases is like mother, like son. and and I don't really know. I guess in many ways, Frank's, it's not really behavior, but rather like attitudes, I guess. So like Frank has, like stupid faces that he pulls that looks quite similar to my stupid faces that I pull. He is quite the complainer. We say that his rapper name is Lil Huff because he just goes around huff, huff. He is a very, he's got a lot to say, and so do I, clearly. So in that way, I guess, but how much of that is projection and how much of it is actually like living close together and being actually similar, who knows? But do dog people care? I don't think so. Like, I think it's just like all kind of done in good fun. Like it's fun to project onto dogs. That's partially how we relate to our dogs, I think. Like, you said that you write texts from Bunsen.
Yeah.
Like it's 100% projection. Like you are imagining what he would say, right?
Yeah.
And I would speak from Frank's perspective, but is that what he's really saying? Who knows? Probably not. But it's fun.
Yeah.
And don't we have dogs because they are fun? Isn't that kind of the gist of it?
Oh, they're huge amounts of fun. You betcha. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a chicken or an egg thing, though, because like if your dog does a certain behavior that's similar to what you do, then you encourage them to keep doing it. Like, oh, that's so cute. Yeah. He's huffing. Yeah. Like Beaker does too. And we're like, because she huffs as well.
Yeah, she has little unhappy huffs. She kind of like goes, It's hilarious.
Yeah. And so when she does that, we definitely take note of it and we think it's funny. So we're like, oh, Beaker, you're huffing. And so does she continue doing that because we pointed it out as part of, dog training and their socialization.
Positive reinforcement.
That positive reinforcement that they're going to keep doing it because they're getting positivity out of us. Interesting. Mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Over to Danielle and Tracy. Thank you for your question.
Hey, first off, thank you for staying up to, you said it was almost 3 a.m. where you are?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, so sorry, but thank you. This chat has been kind of awesome to listen to, though. So I just wanted to know about this study that you were doing with people who admitted that they kind of see their dogs as their children. Mm-hmm. I wonder, was there any kind of a follow-up or any kind of question that, about how they feel on these big holidays. I'm not sure if they celebrate like Mother's Day and Father's Day, but like how they kind of relate to Mother's Day, seeing ones who don't have actual human children, how they interact with the day and interact with people on that day.
That's a great question because I have such a great story. So I interviewed this woman who has a older golden retriever that she's raised from puppyhood with her husband, and they don't have human kids. And she was like, yes, this dog is my child, and oh, like this is something that like proves that this is my child. And she told me that her husband gets a Father's Day card from the dog. Yeah. And he'll get birthday cards and Christmas presents from the dog. And that was like what cemented the dog's status as like the child and the member of the family. And I think that's actually like such an important thing because like holidays are supposed to be like a family thing, right? Like it's Christmas, and then it's like people just kind of assume that that's the time that you get to spend with your family, or Father's Day, Mother's Day. It's like very parental kind of thing. And like in other places there's like Children's Day, and if the UK celebrated Children's Day, you bet I'm gonna treat my dog to a bunch of treats and toys. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I just thought about that because we just had Mother's Day recently, and I'm a lot like you as far as I never wanted human children of my own, but I have always seen my dogs as my children. I have two dogs, and this my family, because I tend to spend my holidays with my parents and my brother, and we're all going around wishing Happy Mother's Day to each other, and they kind of jokingly wish me a Happy Mother's Day too. It's like, I just always wonder, it's like, am I the only one who just kind of feels weird about Mother's Day being a mother to non-human children?
No, I don't feel weird about it at all. I'm like I've grown to be very comfortable in my motherhood. And especially because, I don't want human kids, and I never wanted human kids. I'm not even sure if I'm able to have human kids. So I'm like, well, dogs are my children. That's that.
That's a great question, Danielle. And thanks for coming to the space. Danielle is going to be one of our guests in a couple weeks on Science Chat. We might have to talk about football again, Danielle.
And it's funny because I'm about to get my tickets for this year's upcoming season. So yes, I'm
I've never learned as much about football as when I talked to Danielle. She was a guest on the Science Podcast a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. Great question too. I never even thought of that. Chris, do you want to tell everybody about what we do with presents with the dogs?
Do you mean like there's Christmas presents under the tree from Bunsen and Beaker, and Adam and Duncan love it? They love getting presents from the dogs.
Yeah, we do. We are those people. Both are
dog people.
Yeah, we are dog people. Our human kids get presents from our non-human kids. Something very small, but they love it. They're like, "Oh, this is from Bunsen. This is from Beaker," right? So it's cute. And and Duncan's 24. So
yeah, and at first you kind of bugged me about that, Jason, when I did that.
I was like, "What? How did they wrap it?" Is the first thing. Actually, I was just perplexed as to the how. No, I'm just kidding. I'm on board with it now.
Yeah, it's easy to become on board with. I mean, it's not not a horrible thing.
No. Also, when we get presents for them, we do get presents for Bunsen and Beaker for like Christmas and for their birthdays. And I remember
you also were weirded out about you.
Yeah, but you were whispering to me about their presents, and I'm like, they're dogs. They don't know. You don't need to whisper about what you got them for Christmas.
Yeah, you do.
You don't know. They might be more sentient than you think.
I don't think so, but that's just me. All right. So we got one more. We got a couple time for a few more questions. I want to respect your time because it's so late. Maythe, do you have time for one more question?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we'll bring Paula up. She's requested.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay, perfect.
But it says connecting.
Yeah, it just takes a second, the whole Twitter thing. We've
There
had
she is.
we've had people popping in and out of Clubhouse.
Nice.
I know they come in and they're like, "What's going on?" and then they leave. So it's weird. But hi, Paula. Go ahead.
Hi, how's everybody doing tonight? I just have one quick question. Don't you think too that retail stores also really push like having your pets as your children, because you can buy them Christmas stockings full of treats. They have costumes for them for Halloween or Christmas or Easter, and you dress them up. But I wasn't a really big dresser, but I must admit I have two confessions. My mom always named the dogs after deceased relatives, and we always have a joke that my brother's name was Spot and I was Rover. So and my husband, I only have 3 dogs and one I might be losing, but not to get into that, but I've just been having a tough day. But I always get birthday cards and Christmas cards from the dogs, and one from my husband, but one from the dogs. And just to see which ones he picks out for the dogs are like really spot on. So, but my question was, but don't you think that, most dog owners do see their pets as children, and when maybe non-pet owners don't, because if you don't have a pet, you don't know that unconditional love. And because I had relatives that hated when I signed my Christmas cards, and they would say, my name, my husband's name, and then all the dogs would be on the bottom with a big paw print.
Oh. Okay, so about the retail aspect of dog children, totally. That's actually one of my chapters on economies of multi-species kinship. Like, dogs are so deeply embedded in our lives in so many ways, including our, capitalist economy, and how there's so much meaning kind of imposed on spending money and getting the economy going. And dogs are just, I guess, one of many really kind of easy ways to make money, because dog people are obsessed with dogs, and they will buy things that say things like, dog mom or dog whatever, and buy Christmas cards from the dog's perspective and sign Christmas cards from the dog's names and all that. And about unconditional love, I don't really know what to do with that concept, because it's come up so many times in my research, and I certainly feel that kind of unconditional love from my dog. But it also makes me kind of uncomfortable in many ways, because I think that leaves a lot of room for mistreatment of dogs, because they will love you just like no matter how you treat them. Like, they'll always greet you with happy faces, wagging tails, even if you've left them alone in the house for hours because you were busy and you come home tired and you have no energy or time to spend with them. But they'll just be happy to hang around, and that's kind of easy to take advantage of, if I could put it in that kind of crude way. But I hope people also exercise that kind of unconditional love towards their dogs and reciprocate, because they deserve that. Like, they give you more than you'll ever imagine that they can. Like, I think a lot of people who don't have pets maybe don't really understand what kind of love it is that they get from their dogs, or from any pet really. But it really is, you're right, it's such a special kind of love, and it is unconditional, and they'll stick by you, even if they huff at you from time to time and grumble because they want something from you, or yeah.
No, I totally agree. And I know what you're saying, because there's always a flip side of things, when people treat dogs badly and, they still go to them. So, but we're
Yeah.
trying to good dogs and kind people, and hopefully, I know the world isn't all rainbows, but, like I said, it's just a special thing to see what they give to us. And it's
Yeah.
like that saying that if you can just match up to what they give you, you'd be really doing great. So,
Yeah.
and yes, Jason, we do put presents on the tree for the dogs. and they do sniff them out, and they do rip them open, and they used to get excited. We actually, real quick, we used to have one that used to look at the fireplace because, as you know, when you hang your stockings, and it would know that it was a chewy bone in there, and it would stare days at the stocking. And she was just a little Yorkie, so she knew that it was up there. And I think it was bigger than she was, but we used to laugh because we're like, "Oh my God, she knows!" But anyway, well, thank you very much for answering my question, and it's very fascinating, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. I think we are out of folks who are asking questions, and to respect your time, and because it is so late and you are in Scotland, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for being a guest tonight, Maythe.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was a lot of fun and really interesting. Yeah. Thank you for
always.
I don't know if you drunk a bunch of coffee or tea or something, but you did great. I don't know. I would not be able to, Chris knows, I would not be able to stay up this late. I would be a wreck.
I mean, I am a bit of a night owl, so that helps, but I'm actually just running on pure adrenaline because I'm a bit of a nervous public speaker.
No, you did great.
But
it was
thank you so
good.
much for having me.
So everybody who's still in the chat, please follow Maythe. And then you have a website that has some of your illustrations, because we never even got into that, but you do some amazing artwork. So
thank you.
Yes, I do background on the guests, and I creepily go through everything that they have. So
I was like, I don't remember telling them this.
No, odetodogs.com. Yeah, so make sure if you like Maythe, you can check out her profile, and it's got the link to the website Ode to Dogs. So yeah, anywhere else we can check out that you have stuff, Maythe, before we close up?
Ode to Dogs is also my Instagram account.
Okay.
That's where I also post my art stuff. So if you're on Instagram and if you want to look at my wonky dog drawings, that's where they are.
No, they're adorable. I love them.
So let me know.
All right, awesome. All right, thanks again to our guest tonight, Maythe Han, Anthrozoologist, who talked to us about the kinship between humans and dogs, the amazing stuff and some of the not so good stuff, and also her research with dog parents, dog moms, dog dads. I think of myself as a dog dad, actually, Chris. I can be honest about that. You're
the dad guy.
The dad guy, but I'm not the dog dad guy, though. But that's fine. If you are interested in talking more about pets, we have Pet Chat every Saturday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And our Science Chat next week has nuclear engineer Mairead Montague. So we're going to be talking nuclear energy next week, going from dogs and dog moms and dog dads to nuclear energy. That's quite the jump, but that's good because that's what Science Chat is all about. We all learn something when we listen to folks like Maythe. So once again, thanks, Maythe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You betcha. Thanks to all of our speakers who had the courage to ask questions, and to all of everybody in the audience. You could be anywhere on planet Earth, but you're here in our space. Thanks for joining. Okay, take care, everybody. We'll talk to you on Saturday for science, empathy, and cuteness. Space ending in 3, 2, 1.